Come here. Come here. Yeah, we're playing keep away. It's Wednesday, September 14th. Fairly cloudy this morning. Wind is supposed to come up a bunch, and the sun is supposed to shine. Maybe not full sun, but mostly sunny. So the beans are dry and getting drier, basically. I would guess that probably the stuff on the ground is a little bit damp just from moisture coming up overnight, but should be able to run pretty early here, I think. I'm going to get the combine blown off just a little bit and the daily lubrications done and head to the field. I think we got this basically ready to go to the field. I still need to grease the bushings on the ends of the reel, but otherwise I think should be ready to go. So ended up replacing this guard that came loose yesterday, put new bolts in, and then put washers on this. So I think part of the deal with this is that the steel on these guards are not as thick as the John Deere ones would be, so this tab ends up kind of sticking down, and I don't know if that has something to do with why that worked loose. I made the comment yesterday, I wondered if those got tightened, but I'm pretty sure I remember tightening those down all the way, and it went several days before it caused problems, so just a weird thing, I think. But ended up replacing 3 sections here. I think I replaced that one and 1 or 2 farther down the cutter bar as well. I did notice one little problem here. So on this end of the knife drive, let's see if you can see it in the, see how there's play there? You can hear it. Hear the grease sloshing a little bit. That should be basically tight, which is kind of disappointing because I think we just put that knife drive end on last year when we were trying to figure out why we had some wobble or some vibration. It seems like the last few days I've been noticing more shake from the sickle, and I have a feeling that that probably might be what the problem is. If I had more than 20 acres left, I would probably change that out, because we have the one that came off when we put this one on, and I think it's actually okay. But for a day, it's probably not gonna cause, I mean, it's not gonna, it might get a little worse, but it's not gonna cause anything else to really break, I don't think, within 3 hours of running. So I think we're just gonna leave it and deal with it later. Got the truck full and headed to the elevator. I just had to walk down to where we're loading the truck to get the grain cart, and have a pretty full hopper on the combine right now, going on to the grain cart. Can almost get what I have left all in one frame. There's a little bit down over the hill that you can't see, but getting there. Gonna have a little bit of a late lunch. It's right around noon right now, but gonna get this wrapped up and then switch back to corn here this afternoon probably. what you see in front of the combine is the last of my 2020 soybean crop. And a red-tailed hawk, but he's over here. Yay! Actually, I probably have a little bit of cleanup I'm going to go back and do in a couple bottoms of terraces and stuff, but effectively, the last of the soybeans are going into the grain tank. Get stuff switched back to the corn head and probably try to run some corn this afternoon. So before we switch this to the corn head, I need to do a little bit of cleanup on the platform. There's a fair chance that we'll have this back on the combine before we put everything away for the winter, but just in case we don't, and to keep mice out to some extent in the meantime, I need to blow out all the dust and soybeans and residue from the stems and pods and stuff, both in the auger trough area and around the sickle, and then there's also some spots underneath that like to collect stuff up underneath the skid plates and underneath the shields on the ends. So although it would have been nice to be done blowing things off for today, we get to do that next. Well, I would not go so far as to say completely spotless, but we got most of the stuff blown off, or at least loose. There's still a little bit behind the green spiral tubing there. But it's pretty hard to get the stuff that's down in the trough all blown out of there. So I'm just gonna kind of leave it where it's at and bring a leaf blower out here and blow it out through the feeder house opening once we get it off the combine. Before we park this, we need to get the cylinder stops down on the reel, like so. So then we'll set that down on the stops before we unhook the hydraulic hoses so there's no pressure on the lines. I will take these snoots off, but we're going to deal with that later. Mostly just take them off so that it takes up less space in storage. So we got electrical connector, that's what runs the header control. So automatically adjusts the feeder house on the combine up and down based on what the head feels, if it's against the ground hard or not touching the ground. Then we got hydraulic lines for the reel lift and fore and aft, which is basically means how far forward ahead of the, in front of the head or back close to the auger the reel is. Put these dust plugs in here so that nothing gets in there. Always tie the stuff up so it can't get into the drive line down below there, get caught in anything. I should have pulled the pin at the bottom of the feeder house while I was over there, and I forgot, didn't I? I pulled the chain couplers off earlier. So there's basically a double wide chain that goes in here, and then this slides over it that ties this onto the lower shaft of the feeder house. So then this is your actual reel rotation. So the reel going around, and this is one of the lines for the fore and aft or raise lower. I'm not sure what's what exactly. Just know they all got to be hooked up to work. So the reel hoses get hooked together. Since we have the down corn reel on the corn head pretty much always, we'll hook those back up when we hook the corn head up, but otherwise you need them hooked together so that the oil can bypass if there's no head on the combine and the separator gets engaged. We'll clean that up just a touch and put the dust cap on. Then those get stowed up in this little pocket on the bottom of the feeder house. I'm not even going to shove this line for the reel all the way in because I'm just going to pull it back out in a few minutes. So we should be free on all of that stuff, although I forgot to put that dust plug in, so we'll do that quick. Then basically what holds the head onto the combine, there's two pins right down here. So at this point, when we set the head down, it'll be able to pivot forward as we lower onto the header cart, and then we'll be able to pull away. So we'll do that on the other side, and should have this sitting on the head cart within a couple of minutes. Corn head is on, pulling back up here in front of the shop. Need to hook up the hydraulics and PTO shaft and make a couple adjustments on the combine, but hopefully within an hour or so we'll have this guy all ready to go for corn. Got the combine switched over, and Dad's running corn here at the home farm. We need to switch the auger to this bin because that's where we want the corn to go. So I've got the swing hopper raised up enough that it won't drag. I'm going to try to just move the auger raised up most of the way, hopefully. I'm not going to have to move it a lot to get it up to this bin, I don't think. Hopefully I don't regret that. This auger has a pretty wide base, so I think I'll be okay. I did sort of figure out the spot, so we try to be lazy when possible. And once we had it set up last fall, or before we took it down, basically measured off of the corner post on the yard fence up here. So I think I had down west, which would be straight in line. So I think right there is where I want the hitch pin to end up, but I sort of made the arc the distance that I wanted it from the corner post. So basically I should be able to get the hitch pin there and the auger in line over the spout, and I should be in the right spot to hit the center-ish of the grain spreader. This bin did not spread terribly level last year, so we may end up tweaking that just a little bit. I also need to shovel inside a little bit because this bin still has corn in it that I'm carrying over from last year, which is another can of worms. I'll maybe try to get into that after a bit. I think we're basically in position. I didn't end up quite on my line from last year, but as long as the grain's going into the bin, that's kind of what counts. I'm probably going to need to put the jack on this wheel and tweak it just a little bit to the left. Since this is 95 feet long, and in order to move it, you basically have to have the hopper suspended, hanging off of the left side. It actually tweaks it over a little bit to the left, so when you actually set it on the ground, then the auger moves right. And I tried to compensate, but don't think I got it perfect. So that's basically ready to go now. I need to grab a shovel and try to level off the grain inside. It also just clouded over big time. You can see it's still pretty clear to the south and east and dark to the northwest. Actually, maybe it was a little darker earlier when the clouds first rolled in. I mean, it almost looks like it could rain, but there's nothing on the radar, nothing predicted. But I think it is supposed to be cloudy tonight. We're up in the 42-foot bin now, so this is the corn that's getting carried over from 2019. As you can see, I mean, we pull out of the center sump, so we've got a low spot there, and we're high on the edges. It's been so warm and windy and sunny and dry the last couple weeks that the corn is coming out of the field basically as dry as it needs to be to store until next summer. So the good news is, A, we don't have to pull the corn out of the drying bin and put it into this bin. B, it probably doesn't matter that this is perfectly level as long as we get it level-ish. So I'm basically going to take the shovel and go around and kind of try to fill in the middle a little bit, and then we'll just dump corn on top to kind of get it leveled off and make sure that we're level at the end. One of the things that has been a little bit of a process that shouldn't have been in my life lately is that, so with crop insurance, basically they want to be able to make sure that you actually grew what you report for bushels. So like you can't report that you grew 250 bushels when you only grow 150 and then get a big claim the next year when it only actually makes 150. So basically if you're carrying over production, you kind of want to get a bin measurement. I don't think that we're going to have any claims, but you still want to be able to have some sort of a record to go back on to say that, you know, even though this will be sold in 2021, part of it was 2019 corn, we didn't overstate the yield for 2019 and understate the yield for 2020. So that requires a crop insurance adjuster to come measure the bin. I contacted my agent, he put in a request. A couple weeks later, hadn't heard anything. Contacted the agent again, he called, the office. Heard from an agent shortly thereafter, an adjuster shortly thereafter, that he would be here within the week. Not exactly sure when, but within a week. 2 weeks later, hadn't heard a word. So I got back in touch with him and basically said that we had a drying bin full of grain, full of corn, that was dry, that we kind of wanted to transfer out. So the guy came, measured the bin, sent me the measurements. Bushel is technically a measure of volume, but bushels of grain are normally by weight per grain. So for corn, it's 56 pounds. For soybeans, it's 60 pounds. Other things are different. So the whole premise of taking a bin measurement is that you figure out the volume of grain, and if you know the density, then you can figure out how many pounds of grain are there. To do that, you use a test weight scale, which is a little thing. I mean, it's 18 inches long, has a little pint cup at the end, and a weight that you slide back and forth. The adjuster drove all the way from Kansas, or was in Kansas at the time, had some other stuff this way, apparently, I don't know. Anyway, drove here, took a bin measurement, assumed that the corn was 56 pounds, almost entirely sure, did not bother to take the 3 minutes to do a test weight measurement. So basically what he came up with said that there's quite a few less bushels in this bin than there actually are, because most of what we hauled out in August was 60 pounds plus or minus. So that's like a 7% difference in density, so 7% difference in bushels, which if you're talking about 10,000 bushels plus or minus, that's 700 or 800. Kind of a lot to be off, really, and disappointing, especially given that it took a month to get the dude here, to have him not even make an attempt to do a decent job of it. Disappointing, to say the least. Got enough things to worry about. And apparently the bin measurement is not super binding, so we're just going to sort of make a note that probably it's wrong and there's actually more bushels here than that, and go from there. Anyway, I've put off shoveling enough. So basically what I'm going to try to do is go around once and rake this down some and then see how it looks. I'm hoping to kind of do this quick and dirty as much as possible, to sort of get leveled out but not perfectly level. Well, I don't know if that's going to look any different on the video, but I shoveled down probably a foot and a half on the side and sort of just shoveled it to the middle. So there's still a pretty good divot there, but it's smaller than it was. I think from the grain bin calculator thing that I had plugged stuff into earlier, probably like that cone area would be like 3,500 bushels or something like that. So it takes a while to move that much grain using a aluminum scoop shovel. Got a pretty good farmer foot massage going on with corn in my boots now. So I'm going to dump those out here in the bin. And then I'm guessing that Dad probably has some, if not all, of the wagons full now. So we'll start dumping some stuff in the top.